Welcome to the Nonprofit Report, your update on nonprofit organizations, issues, and leaders, viewable on YouTube and M. Oppenheim TV. I'm your host, Mark Oppenheim. Today, we're going to get an update on our oceans with fantastic, wonderful, wise guest, Mark Spalding, president of the Ocean Foundation. Mark, it is so great to have you back and so great to have this update. I've been reading with distress some of the reporting coming out of on the conditions of our oceans. And so thank you so much for spending time with us today.
Thanks for inviting me. I'm happy to be here.
So, Mark, I was reading about the collapse of the shellfish fisheries in Galicia. There are huge bleaching events going on in the Great Barrier Reef in Australia. These are all canary in the coal mine areas. We're seeing salmon stock being depleted. We're seeing fisheries around the world having some struggles going on with huge economic impacts. Could you talk a little bit about how you're seeing the ocean, the condition of our oceans develop in the last 3 to 5 years, and what you see coming at us in the next 3 to 5 years?
So the instances you just started with, Galicia and the shellfish collapse, it's horrible. I mean, about 90%. Loss in the space of just a few years. The bleaching events as well. All of this is climate change, which is the number one threat to the ocean, bar none. It is changing the temperature of the ocean. It's changing the pH and the acidity of the ocean. It's changing the sea level height. So we're getting sea level rise. And all of that affects all of the plants and animals in the ocean. Obviously, some things can migrate to deeper water or farther north or farther south where it's cooler, but a lot of species can't. Corals can't. Seagrasses can't. And so we're seeing losses as this all increases. There was a study that just came out this week about the fact that the ocean is getting so much warmer, so much faster than predicted, and it's because we're trapping so much carbon in the atmosphere and so much heat, therefore, is being transferred into the ocean that it is becoming an accelerator that's getting worse and worse. And so we see all of this stuff. And then we, of course, combine that with the fact that, we take too much good stuff out of the ocean and dump plastic and all sorts of other pollutions in, and you've got, a recipe for a accumulation of risk and exposure that's horrible.
It seems that what we're doing is we're exploiting our world, our oceans, and so on. We're exploiting them, and we're taking wealth out of them. We're converting that exploitation into wealth. In other words, I'm earning an income from that exploitation, but we're not stewarding. So basically, my kids aren't going to be able to make the same income. That means that people in Galicia who rely on the economic sustenance, their next generations won't be able to do that. So that'll change the entire economy of that region. It seems also that while I can extract oil and other elements from the ocean through mining and other activities, that if I'm destroying the environment, I'm actually affecting my neighbors in a way that I don't have to fund. How do we change our behaviors, and how do we bring this to bear? Because there's this sort of philosophy out there that, well, eventually nature abides, nature will recover. It might take 1,000 years or whatever, but it's okay. It's just sort of the way things have always been. How do we change people's idea of that approach that is causing so much damage?
Great way to put the question, by the way, Mark. The Ocean Foundation's mission is to improve ocean health, improve climate resilience, and improve the blue economy. Part of what we're talking about when we talk about the blue economy is reversing that behavioral problem that you just raised. How do we talk to corporations? How do we talk to regulators? How do we talk to others about increasing the sustainability?
Right? How do you talk to me? I'm the problem, right? I mean, I am part of the problem. It's how I behave.
Yeah, yep, exactly. So I need to talk to you as a consumer. I need to talk to the grocery store you buy from, and I need to talk to the fishing conglomerates and local village fishermen who supply them about behavioral change from that in that entire chain of custody of a fish or a shellfish from Galicia. This is part of what we've been building and doing at the Ocean Foundation. We're now advising 4 different investment funds in which we go out of our way to buy stock in companies who have ocean solutions, or buy stock in companies who need to have their behavior changed, and then engage their management as shareholders and talk to them about what they can change. We've been doing this now since 2021, and we have about a 90% success rate of talking to corporations and saying, you need to change this behavior, this product, this practice, and they're willing to do it. And that gives me some hope that there is a chance to change behavior. There's a lot of organizations who work with consumers, and there are a lot of folks who suggest what you should and shouldn't buy at the fish counter, and we support them as well.
So let me just challenge that a little bit, because to me it seems like we might be changing behaviors, but are we working at the margins as opposed to having enough speed and enough influence and enough power to change behaviors in a way that will affect my children, right? If I'm talking 20 years down the road, right, and I might be, dead and gone by then, that's a really short time frame. And we're talking about, yes, we're talking about individual changes that lead to system changes, but to get that happening fast enough, are we actually being successful, or are we just telling ourselves that we're being successful because we're having a good experience today with one person?
Yep. So I try and tell people that, yes, if you just take your own personal action, it's not going to make enough difference. But if everybody acts and does one thing every day that makes a difference, 2 or 3 things a day that make a difference, it adds up. There are a lot of us. And if we're all thinking about this, we can make a difference. But your underlying point is absolutely right. We don't have a lot of time. And we particularly don't have a lot of time when it comes to how climate change is affecting the ocean and the animals and plants that live in it and all the humans who rely on it. And, the new president's withdrawal from the Paris Agreement, on his first day in office is, not the direction that we need to go. We need American leadership to do something about climate change. We need to have follow through on the agreements to help developing countries actually take action. And that means some, transfers of wealth, if you will, from the countries who cause climate change to those who are victims and are least contributing to the problem.
I wonder whether we're all talking in the wrong terms, right? Here we're talking about transfer of wealth and so on. I wonder whether part of the issue here is that there's a misconception that withdrawing from climate agreements that constrain our short-term activity, there's a misconception that that's in our short-term interest to withdraw. I'm getting the sense that the issue here is that in the short term, we are damaging economies by ignoring action on these issues.
Yes.
And in the short term, I'm not talking about a huge time horizon. I'm talking about within the next 5 years.
Yep.
I'm saying that by not coordinating, we are going to put whole areas into greater danger for floods, for fires, for natural disasters. In the short term, we're going to see whole economies tank because of these activities. Do you think that that's an argument that can logically be made within a reasonable time horizon where people can feel that they're threatened themselves in the way I feel threatened? For example, I live in fire country, right? You see what's going on in LA. You see the floods that are happening all across the world in places where the monsoons are no longer predictable and they're coming at the wrong times, or they're not coming at all. And then
Right.
is there a way that we can make that argument within a short time frame where I can experience it myself, and maybe that will goad me to action?
I think there is, and let me try this out on you. Any of us who have ever been prescribed medication, you know, can view it either as an evil we're putting in our body, or something that allows us to take control. And by taking the medication and taking it, in a timely fashion, we're preventing high blood pressure, cholesterol, maybe even mental illness.
Statins.
And
What a great example.
exactly.
Take it. It costs me money. I take it. Maybe I don't love it so much. I don't like the schedule, but I know that it will reduce my chances of a heart attack. Fabulous example.
Right. And so I feel that working to address climate change, is the same thing. It is, if we actually tell ourselves that we're taking control, we are gaining control over the future and the future for our children and grandchildren. That is something that I think equates to take your statins. And I think our challenge right now is there's a perception that these things are causing short-term harm. And, yeah, maybe, but not that big. I'm in the middle right now of writing a paper for the Ocean Panel for Sustainable Ocean Economy, on the future of the workforce in the blue economy. And with the exception of offshore oil and gas, we don't see any predictions for reduction in job opportunities. And even there, we see that those people are going to be incredibly valuable to everybody else who's working offshore on wind, wave energy, offshore aquaculture, you name it, right? Those skill sets of being able to work offshore are going to be in demand. So, this isn't going to fundamentally harm the economy to redirect it in a way that is actually going to be good for our health, good for the ocean's health, good for the longevity of the planet. And, it's just like take your statins.
So let me ask you another question about the ocean economy, and then we're going to get on to some of your programs. The ocean economy, if you look at the ocean economy, the extractive industries, oil and gas in particular, little bit of labor, a lot of capital investment, and high returns. Right? Huge amount. You're extracting material and you're just selling it, right? And it's very centralized. Now, if you take a look at the fishing economy has many more jobs, but it's also more fragmented. It's more difficult to control. It's lower margins because there's more competition, right? So you don't have as big, powerful players anymore. You have a fragmented group. Do we have a political issue in which the huge employment that the oceans can provide, the huge economic advantages, it's all fragmented. It's all on coastal communities all throughout the global south and the coastal communities in the United States and so on and so forth. They're small slivers of the population, but it has a huge impact. Whereas you have very centralized interests who are promoting their own interess. And so it's an uneven political field where the centralized interests have more money, more power, more coordination, there are fewer players. And the larger economic interests have less power, it's more fragmented, more employment, but less coordination. Do we have this kind of an issue? And how do we address that from the point of view of ocean advocacy, in which we make common cause with people who are fisher people or people who live off the ocean or adjacent to it? How do we do that?
So part of that, I think, is leveraging the consumer and making sure the consumer understands that and the value chain that the fish they're eating on their plate or they're buying at the grocery store came from that fragmented system through a wholesaler, through a retailer to their house. And that gives a different perspective, which people don't normally have. And then I think some of the things we're trying to do to talk to the wholesalers and the retailers, because we then force them to reach down to those community level places where people are catching the fish and engaging them as part of improving what they're doing, how they're doing it, and all of those sorts of things. But part of this also has to do with price, right? That oil and gas price doesn't include the harm that the oil and gas used as directed causes. The fish, doesn't necessarily have the right price either if we're overexploiting it or somehow otherwise causing harm to the system in a way that takes it out. And so we need to be willing within reason to pay more for a few things so that the price actually equates to the harm or equates to the need of the communities, right? They catch too many fish because that's what they need to do to sell enough to make money to live. If we paid a bit more, they wouldn't have to catch as many.
That's a very interesting point. So what you're saying is that there's a market failure to include pricing of coastal damage, of floods, of pollution to fish, or even harm to the fishing stock. And so because of that market failure, we're not getting the pricing signals
Correct.
that would adjust our
And then we add on to that subsidies for the oil and gas companies, subsidies for the long distance fishing fleets who get, discounted fuel and all that sort of stuff. This is, a problem we could sit down and figure out with reduction of subsidies and modest taxation to adjust this in a way that didn't necessarily harm the consumer that much.
It's interesting because what you're not saying, and I find this really fascinating. What you're not saying is oil bad, right? You're not saying that anybody is particularly at fault. I mean, we're all at fault if anybody's at fault. But you are saying that there are things that we're not recognizing and we're not responding quickly enough to those factors, and in consequence, what we see is impacts on human beings. We need to start thinking a little bit more cleverly about how we can expose ourselves to signals. And sometimes signals, sort of like exercise. I hate getting up and exercising in the morning, but I got to do it, right?
Yep.
Taking statins or whatever. That's what you're basically saying, and that's sort of what you're doing at the Ocean Foundation. You're trying to get the signal across to people like me who have other things to do.
That's right.
Right.
And the signals becoming, my job's getting easier because the signals are becoming more and more clear, right? Yeah. Fires have been happening, floods have been happening, other things are happening at such scale and at such frequency that, the signal is getting much more clear, and the ability to insure against them, the ability to rebuild afterwards is diminishing. And the sad thing was the addition to GDP of rebuilding after a fire or a flood is a positive for the economy, right? And so the signals only harms the economy when it becomes so big in scale that we can't ignore it and we can't build our way back afterwards.
Well, I think that's a very good and interesting point, right? The whole idea is that capital that is already invested in built product, when it goes up in flames, you have to rebuild it. So there is a false signal that's coming in because people have jobs, but that's all done through deficits. And then you have to wait for a long time of recovery to happen before that all equalizes. So basically, you lose a lot of wealth, but you have the illusion of a lot of activity as you're making up for that. Let's talk a little bit about your programs. Talk about Blue Resilience. Talk about the ocean science equity programs that you have. Talk about how you take these topics that we've been talking about and create not only policy papers but also actions out in the market that shift the realities of how we behave, either as individuals or as corporations or as communities.
So the Ocean Foundation has three major initiatives, and that's in addition to the services we provide to philanthropists and fiscal hosting of projects to provide services to them. We've created three of our own initiatives. Blue Resilience Initiative conserves and restores seagrasses, mangroves, and salt marsh estuaries. These are natural barriers to storms, storm surges, waves. They take up and store carbon. They move it much more quickly into the soil than trees or field grasses do. And then, of course, they don't catch on fire, so they don't re-release it. This is a really valuable part of our participation in addressing climate change. We are working on these projects all over the world. We now have the largest mangrove restoration project in the United States right now. We're also
in Florida.
It's actually in Puerto Rico.
Oh, interesting.
Yeah, so a place where a lot of harm was done by hurricanes, we're going in and replanting and making sure everything is in the system is refunctioning, and it's succeeding wildly. We have a success rate over 85% of the plants the trees we plant. So it's really, really remarkable.
And that provides habitat. It cleans the water. It creates barriers to hurricanes, which of course Puerto Rico was really harmed by successive hurricanes. So that's really fabulous. And then the seagrasses are really important for stabilizing sandy, erosive environments adjacent to oceans and ensuring that estuaries in particular also are stabilized. So that's amazing. Is that mostly done by a cohort of volunteers? Because it's hugely labor intensive.
Hugely labor intensive. It is done a lot by volunteers. We also work hard to find local nonprofits that we can provide grants to organize those volunteers and get the work done. And so we don't try and populate the world with our staff in these different places. We try and make it happen and build the capacity of others to take care of themselves.
So in many respects, the Ocean Foundation is a type of community foundation. It's
exactly
not
right.
Localized in a geography. It's not defined by geography. It's defined by cause and the purpose in which that money is redirected. You are functioning also as a donor advisor, aren't you?
Correct. Yeah, we consider ourselves the only community foundation for the ocean.
If I come to you and I want to invest in something that you're not doing, right? In other words, you're not. Let's say I don't know. Let's say I'm talking about anchovy stocks in Monterey, right? And you're not working on anchovy stocks in Monterey. Will you just accept my money and figure out how to work on anchovy stocks on Monterey, or will you redirect me to some partner or somebody in your network who might be working on anchovy stocks in Monterey?
It depends. I think often we would take your money and assure you that we will find the organization who's doing the best job to address anchovies in Monterey and provide them with the funds that are necessary, and that we would take responsibility for the grant agreement and the monitoring and the reporting so that you don't have to worry about those things. Occasionally, yes, if we know there's somebody who's much better suited and much better placed geographically or otherwise, we'll send you to somebody else.
So your value add in that particular situation isn't the direct services. Your value add here is in ensuring that my money is well spent and ensuring that the monitoring is done in a tied down way.
Exactly.
So talk a little bit about the other two programs, the Ocean Science Equity Program and the Plastics Program.
So the Ocean Science Equity Program is seeking to help small island developing states and coastal LDCs, lesser developed countries, participate in ocean science. Ocean science is extremely expensive because it's done on the water or in the water, much more expensive than terrestrial science. And so it's often difficult to participate. And so we get people from those developing countries involved as early as possible in co-designing science research that are in the waters of their countries, get them opportunities to join research vessels, participate in the research, get access to the data from the research, and publish from that research so that hopefully, as part of the co-design process, it actually is beneficial to their country and their people, going back to taking care of our fish. And we're really, really excited about it. It's been wildly successful, supported by the United States government, the government of Sweden, various other international donors, and done a lot regarding ocean acidification and other forms of science activities that can be localized and build capacity. It's been remarkable work. The Plastics Initiative was designed to focus on the chemistry of plastic. So thinking about the fact that plastics have additives that give them color, stiffness, sometimes flexibility, sometimes breathability, all of those kinds of things. That those additives are often what make plastic unrecyclable, because we're not dealing with a singular thing the way we are when we're recycling glass or aluminum. So we have to figure out how we're dealing with this. And so we're trying to figure out how to simplify the formulas, make them much more consistent, reduce the different kinds of contaminants, identify what some of them are, for that matter, get the manufacturers to tell us what they're putting in, because that's, trade secrets right now, and begin to address that aspect of the plastic problem. And that too has been something that's been succeeding wildly, in part and not. The wild success has been a partnership with the United States Department of State and three other nonprofits to create a public-private partnership to work with corporations to actually take action on this and participate in doing something about it. The not so good goes back to your unequal power structure with the oil and gas companies, because they're basically the countries who have oil and gas are blocking an international treaty to address plastic pollution in the ocean, despite a resolution by the UN General Assembly.
The thing that really I love about your organization, Mark, and about your approach, your thinking, is this combination of wonky science and practical action, right? And a real sensitivity to the political realities of how do you galvanize people and convince them to work together to our own mutual interest. Mark Spalding, I am so thrilled that you're here to again share the work of the Ocean Foundation with us. Thank you so much. Please thank your donors, your staff, your partners, your funders. It's so important what they do, and we're happy to be part of your effort to get the word out.
Thank you so much. Thanks for inviting me, and I appreciate the help in getting the word out. So I think the first thing is, think about what you eat from the ocean, and think about the fact that some things are local and other things come from a long way away and have a huge carbon footprint. Eat locally instead of from long distance. Think about where you're eating on the scale of sustainability. We know that salmon is farmed, and some of the farming has gotten much better. If you're careful on who you buy from, you've got a good salmon. On the other end of the spectrum, tuna is incredibly popular and part of our sushi diet, but it's not common and it's not easy to get, and it's a luxury product. And so I think if you think about what you're buying from a sustainability standpoint and a carbon footprint standpoint, that would be the first step. Second step is plastic pollution in the ocean. Microplastics in the ocean have become a huge problem. And so anything you can do in your life to eliminate single-use plastic, straws, plastic bags, garment bags from the dry cleaner, anything you can get rid of, you help a lot, because those things are in, less than 6% of plastic is recycled. So it might as well not be recyclable. And so stopping it from ever getting into the ocean by not using it in the first place is a real goal. And you can I buy fabric garment bags and take them to the dry cleaner and say, I want my clothes back in these, not those damn plastic bags. The third thing that you can do, climate change is the biggest threat to the ocean. Therefore, if all of us make some steps to reduce our carbon footprint, walk places, bike places, rather than always driving, taking public transit rather than driving, focusing on shorter trips, just thinking first about the fact that for me to fly to California to see Mark in person instead of doing this by Zoom would be the equivalent of the carbon footprint of a household of 4 for a full year. Right? So is that trip worth it? Is there enough reason to go to California to do an interview like this with Mark in person? Are there other things I can do while I'm there to make that carbon footprint worthwhile? Or do I just say, no, let's do it by Zoom? And so it gets this moment of, if everybody does that, it will add up. It will make a difference, because that's how we got in the bad place we're in the first place, right? It was all of us adding the pollution into the air, using the plastic, single-use plastics, et cetera. It's now we just have to reverse how we got here to get the other direction.